Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr Speaker,
I think the member was calling.
Very much for the opportunity to take a call in further support of the progress of this legislation. I was interested in the comments that the member who's just resumed her seat made in relation to business payments. She wasn't referring to the bill that we're discussing, but that's all right. She was really drawing other related matters into the debate, so I'm not criticising her for that. But she did talk about the huge amount of money in the budget that is going to business support. And that is quite a revelation for the House because, to the best of the public understanding, the business support is finishing in just 2 weeks' time. And I'm sure that her words about how much extra financial support is going into business support will be warmly welcomed. I urge her during the committee stages to give us proper details of that package, because the business people that have finished their day and are at home listening to this debate, if they have the power on and if they have nothing else to do with their life, which is quite possible actually at the moment in Christchurch, then they would be very interested to know the details of it. So I urge the member who just resumed her seat to get the details of the package that she's announced and share it with us during the committee stages or third reading tomorrow morning. Mr Speaker, as I said earlier in this debate, Labor supports the progress of this bill. We have had a series of earthquakes that have caused widespread devastation and trauma to people. I am still concerned, and I hope the Minister is able to comment on this during the committee stages of the bill. I am still concerned that this bill is restricted to 2 earthquakes, one on the 4th of September and one on the 22nd of February, because we did have a third quite substantial one on Boxing Day. It did have a large impact on many people, and it will fall outside the 8-week time gap that this bill imposes. That would be a mistake. I'm sure it would not be deliberate. This bill is intended to help Canterbury people. It's meant to recognise the huge generosity that we have been overwhelmed with from people within our region who have been not affected directly by the earthquake, from people up and down the country. We've had Aucklanders and Wellingtonians supporting us, and of course all the parts in between and the rest of the South Island. We've had people internationally support us. Mr Speaker, we even had people from Japan offering financial support to Canterbury after the devastation in their own country. It was more than a little moving, it was truly humbling to be supported in that way. So for the government to now come to the party, you know, it's the middle of May, 8.5 months after the September quake, but that's okay, I'm sure they've been busy. But for the government to now come to the party and say we're prepared to back the people who have donated goods, who have supported Canterbury, and exclude them from tax duty, from other taxes, is a really good move. So we certainly support that. There are some other concerns that I have, and I briefly mentioned some of them earlier, but I want to put on the record that I am also concerned about the redundancy tax credits. It's great to see that people who have been made redundant as a result of the earthquake will have their tax credit for redundancy payment pushed out by a few months. That is, it's not great actually, I used the wrong word, it's just fair. What I don't understand is if it's fair for Canterbury workers who have been made redundant as a result of the earthquake to have their tax credit payment on redundancy payments pushed out by a few months, why isn't it fair for every other New Zealand worker who is made redundant? Up and down the country we see redundancies literally every day under this government. Why isn't it fair that those redundant workers have their tax credits pushed out actually altogether? Because it's an outrageous imposition on people who are going through a very bad time in their life. They've just lost their jobs. Not from anything they did wrong, but because their business that they've been employed in, perhaps working very hard for very many years, is not able to employ them any longer. This is an opportunity, and I challenge the Minister of Revenue, the Honourable Peter Dunn, to do it during the committee stages. It is an opportunity for him to introduce a supplementary order paper. It would be supported by Labor to eliminate those tax credits altogether. Mr Speaker, it is It is hard not to compare how long that it's taken the government to advance this very straightforward and relatively inexpensive bill, how long it's taken them when you compare the 3 tax packages that were worth $23 billion that we just pushed through under urgency since the budget. It really shows the different priorities that National has compared to Labour. When people are in a state of trauma and in critical need, it's really good to be able to step up quickly and help them rather than to wait for such a long period of time. And certainly the focus should always go on the people who are trying hard, working hard, but not getting very much financial support. They're the people that should be better supported by the government, not the people who, in last year's tax cuts, like the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, received an additional $1,000 a week. That's more than many people in Canterbury are earning. They got not $1,000 a week, an additional $1,000 a week on top of their salary as a result of last year's tax cuts. Mr Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, there will be some questions that we raise in the committee stage, and I hope that there's a minister in the chair who's competent to answer them, or at least takes the opportunity to do it. Because while we support this legislation, we're not opposing any of the intentions. When you have tax legislation that has quite a lot of detail in it, you'll notice when you start looking at provisions CZ23 and CZ24 or GZ3 or MB13 2Q, which is a really interesting clause actually in the Income Tax Act 2007. When you start talking about that level of detail, you should try and get it right, actually. So it will be beholden on the Minister and the Chair during the committee stages to pay attention to the debate and make sure that we do get it right. This isn't just tax legislation, it is retrospective tax legislation. There is no indication in here how many people it will apply to. If the officials know that, it would be good for the Minister to take a call and give us that information. We don't know how it will be applied. If people have already paid tax for some of the goods that are covered by this legislation, will they get a refund? Will they just have an abatement on their next tax bill? What if people haven't put in a tax return? Do they have to file one? What are the forms like? How much bureaucracy are we putting Cantabrians through to get this great gift from the government? Is it worth it? We don't want, actually, a lot of red tape. We don't want a lot of forms. As Amy Adams said earlier in this debate, we have new rules now. We don't like people delaying progress. We don't like people putting barriers in our way to getting help and support and getting on the path to full recovery. So, Mr Speaker, the final point that I want to make is in relation to another major concern that we have in Canterbury, and that was highlighted during the passing of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority legislation. Again, a piece of legislation rammed through Parliament with very limited time for consultation. Only invited submitters were able to have their say there, and that was only after a lot of battling with the Minister responsible for the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery. The other concern that we have, which the Minister in the committee stage might like to allude to, is the power of the Minister, Jerry Brownlee, to instruct our 3 local authorities to sell some of the assets they hold. No amount of tax concession, abolition of tax credits on redundancies, or reduction of tax duty in any regard of donations, which this legislation do, would make up for the anger that Cantabrians would feel if their assets were ordered to be sold by the Minister in charge of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery. So I am pleased to be part of this bill. I'm sorry that it's come so late, but it is a good bill. I hope that it's easy to administer. I hope that it adds to the support that we've received from around the country, and I want to put on record my appreciation to the Minister for introducing it.
Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to begin by